Now, as we've been marking, today marks Donald Trump's 100th day in office since he returned to the White House in January. Let's bring on our defence and security analyst, Michael Clarke, to give us his assessment about his return so far. Michael, how do you measure the last 100 days?
Yeah, well, I mean, Jane, 100 days is a very arbitrary idea, 3 and a bit months, but it's got this ring about it, 100 days. But it has been...
Wasn't it Roosevelt, I think, that had a sort of a set plan for a set number of days?
Yes. In the getting out of the Great Depression, we'll do this in 100 days. And it particularly then attached to John Kennedy, JFK, who was going to remake everything. And so it's got that sense of a new beginning. And so, you know, there it is. Is it new? Is it different? Yes, it is. I mean, Donald Trump has done a lot of things, both in the domestic area and in the foreign and defence policy. Interestingly, in foreign and defence policy, there's not much you can work on from what has been written. In the domestic sphere, all the things he's trying to do to America, to the Constitution, to his relationship with the executive, to the woke agenda, you can see it all in Project 2025, this Heritage Institute document that came out in 2023. And in this thing called Agenda 47, which is the agenda for the 47th president. It's all there. But those documents said almost nothing about foreign and defence policy. They talked about China a lot. They talked about nuclear weapons. But the attitude towards foreign affairs really seems to be made by President Trump himself and the people around him. J.D. Vance, the vice president, very influential, as is Peter Thiel, who is the billionaire who behind J.D. Vance, who put him in the position to be vice president. And if you look at Marco Rubio, Secretary of State, Mike Waltz, the National Security Advisor, a small group of people are actually making this up as they go along in terms of world politics. There's no blueprint there, except that the United States is not going to lead the democracies anymore. It's taken a break from that, probably permanently. The future of democracy in America is a battle that's just getting started inside America. But outside America, the US is withdrawing from leading the democracies. And that's a big, big change for the rest of us.
What do you think the impact of that change is going to be? Where will we see that lack of leadership or that lack of intervention fastest?
We see it in different areas. I mean, we can look at the areas where Trump's policy has been influential so far and say, what's really going on? So think of it in terms of the globe itself. You know, the United States is one of the big four powers. And the other three of the big four powers are China, Russia and India. They're big for different reasons. 3 of those 4 powers are now revisionist. So they want to change the nature of the system, 3 of the 4. And that means for Europe, that's very uncomfortable. It's going to be a really rocky ride for Europe and the other liberal democracies for the next 10 years or more. And then if you look at what's actually happening, let's say take Ukraine, the Ukraine war. Does the United States really want peace in Ukraine? Yes, they do. Not because they want to bring the war to an end, but because they want to get it off the desk. Why? Because what's going on behind the Ukraine war in Trump's approach is a new relationship with Russia. He doesn't care about Russia being an aggressor. He doesn't care about it being anti-democratic. He doesn't care about Biden wanting to use Ukraine as an example of standing up to the dictatorship of autocratic powers. That doesn't matter to him. He wants an economic relationship with Russia, a reset. In great power terms. So what's going on behind the issue in Ukraine is a reset with Russia. Or look at the Middle East, right? The Gaza crisis. What's President Trump's attitude to Gaza? Well, he was instrumental in making the Biden peace plan just around Christmas. He actually made it stick in the first few days of his presidency.
And we also felt that it was his hand behind. There was a big hostage release.
That's right,
as well,
and he deserves some credit for that. Yeah, he got it on the go, but that process came to an end on March the 1st and hasn't been renewed. So what's happening since? He seems to have given Israel a free hand to do what it thinks it needs to do in Gaza. And what Israel seems to be doing is creating the circumstance of a greater Israel. So Israel looks as if it's going to expand in a way that it sort of did in 1967. And Trump is happy with that. Why? Because his game in the Middle East is much more intrinsically about Iran. So Trump wants to humble Iran, if necessary, produce regime change in Iran, but certainly to squash Iran's nuclear ambitions, which have now reached a certain level, partly for all sorts of other reasons. So what's really going on in the Middle East for Trump is Iran. And then look at what's happening in the Americas, in North America itself. I mean, we know what he said about Canada and the Canadians becoming the 51st state. We know what he says about Greenland. What's his thinking here? I mean, Canada, the United States and Mexico, between them are an enormous economic bloc. 3 countries, but between them, they've got a joint GDP of about $25 trillion. That's the biggest single bloc in the world. They are enormously rich in potential. And a more thoughtful president might make something of that. But no, what he's got in mind is physically extending American territory to Greenland and quite likely to Panama in Central America. Who does he admire? President McKinley. What was President McKinley? He was the imperialist president at the turn of the 20th century who gave the United States Puerto Rico, Guam, Hawaii, the Philippines, American Samoa. He was the imperialist president. And what President Trump wants is to go down as the man who physically expanded the territory of the United States, the bit on the map that you could colour red for the United States in this particular case. That's what lies behind it, because it's his instinct. It's not a programme, it's not a project that was laid out a few years ago, as it was in the domestic sphere. It's what's in his head.
Do you think he'd really go for that? I mean, there's been some talk that, if he was to try and create a war between Mexico or between America and Canada, that could also be a potential reason to suspend another election.
People are beginning to say that. They're beginning to say that. And they're beginning to say that the midterms may not take place. That as opposition to Trump grows in the state itself, inside America, once that comes onto the streets, it is said, he will declare a state of emergency and suspend the midterm elections. Now, that's a huge step. And, would he do it? Well, I know some analysts who say, well, he might. It's not ridiculous to suggest that. Well, we'll see. But the fact is he's serious about Greenland. He's serious about it. I mean, if you look at the American continent, or America itself as a country, 40% of the American territory was purchased. I mean, 40% has been bought. So the Louisiana Purchase, Florida, parts of California, Alaska. So almost half of America was purchased. So it doesn't seem ridiculous to say, well, why don't we purchase Greenland? Except the Greenlanders don't want it. The Danes certainly don't want it. And so the United States is in this position of trying to coerce an ally in NATO to giving it a great chunk of territory, the island of Greenland, the biggest island in the world. But my goodness, if President Trump felt that he could colour Greenland in the same country, the same colour as the United States, then he will have earned a place on Mount Rushmore. He'd get his statue along with the other 4 presidents on Mount Rushmore. That's one of the things he would like.
He used to say he wouldn't build one anyway. Thanks very much, Michael. Cheers.